Kahina dropped her bag by the door, tired after a long day in Accra, expecting the usual evening of quiet and comfort. But the moment she stepped inside, something felt off. She froze in the doorway. There, on her living room couch, were her sister Saad and her fiancé, Jalani, sitting close, laughing, holding hands like they were in their own little world. For a second, Kahina thought she must be imagining things. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe she was seeing things wrong. But the warmth in their smiles, the way Jalani's hand rested over Saada's, made it impossible to ignore the truth. Her mind raced. She remembered the long talks with Jalani, the plans they had made together, the promises of forever. And now, all of it seemed to crumble in front of her eyes. Every photo on the wall, every shared memory flashed in her mind, not as happy moments, but as reminders of what had been taken from her. She felt her chest tighten, and a cold wave of betrayal washed over her. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Saad had known exactly what she was doing. Kahina's fingers trembled, her thoughts chaotic, but underneath the shock, a new clarity formed. She wasn't going to react blindly. She would need to face this, to understand it, and eventually, to reclaim what had been stolen. That moment in the doorway changed everything. Innocent family evenings were gone, replaced by a storm of betrayal, questions, and the burning urge to uncover the truth. Kahina couldn't let her anger or heartbreak control her. She knew she needed more than feelings. She needed proof. Sitting at her desk late into the night, she went through her phone, scrolling back through old messages, social media chats, and even bank notifications. Every little detail mattered. The times Jalani had texted Saad when he was supposed to be with her, the small transactions that didn't add up. Each screenshot, each forwarded message felt like another piece of a puzzle, slowly forming a picture she wished wasn't real. She called her closest friends quietly, careful not to raise suspicion. They remembered little details she hadn't noticed, like that time Jalani claimed he was working late, but was spotted in Saada's neighborhood. Her cousin Oba became her anchor. Calm and logical, he helped her check dates, receipts, and other small evidence she had gathered. They pieced together a timeline that left no room for doubt. The more she uncovered, the more it became clear. This was deliberate. Saad had planned it, and Jalani had gone along without hesitation. Kahina also paid attention to her family. Some subtly warned her to stay calm, to think before acting. Others couldn't hide their curiosity, glancing at her with quiet concern. She realized she needed allies who understood the full story and could be trusted when the time came to confront the betrayal publicly. Every night, as she organized files and notes, Kahina's plan started to take shape. She wasn't rushing to confront them in private, not yet. She needed strategy, timing, and undeniable proof. Her anger slowly transformed into determination. The betrayal had shaken her, but it hadn't broken her. With her friends, her cousin, and the evidence she meticulously gathered, Kahina began laying the groundwork for a reveal that would leave no room for lies, excuses, or denial. The wedding in Lagos was only a few weeks away, and Kahina didn't say a word to anyone about what she knew. On the surface, she acted normal, even polite, attending family gatherings and casual calls with a calm smile. Inside, however, she was planning every move with precision. She studied the venue from photos online, memorized the guest list, and noted the schedule down to every small detail. She wanted to know everything: when people would arrive, when the ceremony would start, and which moments would have the biggest impact if the truth came out. Kahina hired a discreet photographer, someone who wouldn't be noticed, under the guise of capturing the event. But she had a different purpose in mind. This photographer would document everything she needed to expose: the subtle interactions, the nervous gestures, the little cracks in Saada's perfect performance. She watched videos of past events, observed Saad on social media, and noticed patterns in how Jalani acted around her sister. Every time Saad laughed a little too freely or leaned on Jalani in public, Kahina stored it away in her mind. Every careless smile, every small boast became fuel for her plan. She spent nights imagining the moment of revelation, thinking about how to make it undeniable, how to control her emotions, and how to ensure everyone saw the truth. Timing was everything. She didn't want a confrontation that would be dismissed as jealousy or drama. She wanted clarity, impact, and an audience who couldn't ignore what they were seeing. Kahina's calm exterior hid the storm inside her. While Saad prepared for a wedding full of triumph and praise, Kahina prepared for one that would shift everything. She carefully mapped out where she would stand, how she would speak, and which moments to use as evidence. Each planning session made her more certain. The reveal would be perfect, and justice would be undeniable. The weeks leading up to the wedding weren't just a countdown. They were her secret preparation, a time for quiet strategy, patience, and turning betrayal into a meticulously executed plan. The night before the wedding, Kahina sat quietly in her room, her thoughts sharp and clear. She wrote a short, private note to Jalani, carefully choosing each word. It wasn't angry or emotional. It was a reminder. She reminded him of the promises he had made, the trust they had built, and the love he had claimed to feel. She didn't accuse him directly in the note, but the message was clear. The truth had not escaped her notice, and consequences were coming. The next evening, she found a moment with him in the presence of a few trusted friends. She didn't yell or cry. She didn't make a scene. Instead, she spoke calmly, her voice steady but firm. Every word carried weight because it was measured, precise, and backed by what she knew. Jalani's face shifted from casual ease to hesitation, then panic. He tried to maintain composure, but the slightest tremor in his voice, the quick dart of his eyes, betrayed him. He knew she had the upper hand, and for the first time, he realized he might not control the narrative. Meanwhile, Saad, who had been walking into the wedding like a queen with everything under her control, started to show cracks in her confidence. Her smiles faltered. Her laughter seemed slightly forced. She noticed the subtle glances between Kahina and Jalani, the quiet intensity in Kahina's eyes. Something was coming, and even she could feel that it was beyond her ability to stop. Kahina held herself with a calm, composed strength that contrasted sharply with their rising panic. She didn't need to shout or threaten. Her poise alone unsettled them. Each small reaction from Jalani and Saad added fuel to her plan, confirming that her timing was perfect. She had created a psychological tension that was almost tangible, a quiet storm waiting to break at the wedding. By the end of that evening, Kahina walked away with a sense of control she hadn't felt since discovering the betrayal. She had planted doubt, shaken their confidence, and set the stage for the dramatic reveal to come. The confrontation wasn't about anger. It was about precision, strategy, and showing that she wasn't a passive victim. Tomorrow, at the wedding, everyone would see the truth, and Kahina would ensure it landed exactly as it should. The morning of the wedding in Abuja arrived bright and buzzing with energy. Guests laughed, hugged, and took photos, unaware of the storm quietly building beneath the polished smile. Music played softly in the background, mingling with the chatter of friends and family. Saad moved through the crowd with ease, radiating triumph and confidence, her every gesture saying, "I have this under control." Kahina arrived shortly after, moving gracefully through the crowd, calm and composed. To everyone else, she seemed like a quiet observer, polite and reserved, offering small smiles and nods. But inside, she was alert, calculating every glance, every interaction. She knew what was coming, and she was ready. Her team of discreet helpers, carefully chosen friends and a few trusted family members, were in position, quietly setting cameras and making sure witnesses were ready. Every angle mattered, every detail counted. She wanted the truth to hit clearly, without room for doubt or excuses. As the ceremony began, the hall shimmered with decorations, the floral arrangements carefully chosen, the soft light bouncing off elegant outfits. Everyone was focused on the couple, but Kahina noticed the small things. The nervous flick of Jalani's eyes toward her, Sada's occasional forced smiles, the tension that lingered just beneath their practiced composure. Each subtle glance, every tiny hesitation added to the invisible electricity in the room. Kahina didn't let her presence distract her. She moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, observing interactions, taking mental notes of who was watching, who was whispering. Guests exchanged polite greetings, but some cast curious looks toward her, sensing something different in the air. The atmosphere was like a coiled spring, beautiful, orderly, and tense, ready to release at any moment. By the time the ceremony reached its most beautiful moments, Kahina felt a quiet satisfaction. Everything was unfolding exactly as she had planned. The guests were present, the cameras were in place, and the tension between the betrayers and the betrayed was subtly visible to anyone paying attention. The stage was set perfectly. Everyone would witness the truth soon, and when it came, there would be no escaping it. Every smile, every polite nod, every hushed whisper had built toward the climax Kahina had been preparing for in secret. The reception was in full swing. Music floated through the hall, guests laughed and clinked glasses, and the scent of food and flowers filled the air. Kahina waited calmly, letting the celebration unfold around her, all while the plan she had nurtured for weeks hovered quietly in her mind. Then she asked for a moment to make a special toast. Heads turned politely, curious, as she stepped to the center with a calm, radiant presence. She lifted her glass but didn't rush. Instead, she began speaking slowly, clearly, and deliberately. At first, she recounted small, seemingly harmless moments, private jokes, offhand remarks, subtle interactions. But each detail she shared carried weight. She spoke of the private messages she had uncovered, the secret meetings, and the exact moment when Saad had crossed the line, taking from Kahina what was never hers to take. Every sentence was precise, impossible to misinterpret, and impossible for anyone in the room to dismiss. Then she raised her tablet, showing receipts, photos, and social media screenshots. The proof was undeniable. Sada's face, once full of smug confidence, slowly drained of color. Her smile faltered, then disappeared entirely, leaving a shocked, almost frozen expression. Jelani shifted uncomfortably, and even the most polite guests whispered to each other, trying to process what they were seeing. Gasps rippled across the hall, breaking the polite hum of conversation. Kahina spoke with quiet authority, her voice steady, her composure unshakable. She didn't shout or dramatize. The power came from the clarity of her words and the evidence she presented. Every piece of proof she revealed layered one shock upon another, leaving Saad unable to hide or deflect. The room was silent except for the occasional gasp, the subtle shuffle of chairs, and the murmurs of recognition from family and friends. It wasn't just exposure, it was poetic justice. Kahina had orchestrated every moment, turning her pain and betrayal into undeniable truth. As she finished, the weight of the revelation settled over the room. Saad sat speechless, the triumph she had hoped for evaporating before everyone's eye. Kahina's calm, radiant demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos her words had created, leaving no doubt that she had reclaimed control, not through anger, but through intelligence, strategy, and courage. After the initial shock of the toast, Kahina didn't stop. She stayed calm, letting the moment settle, then began to peel back another layer of the story. She spoke clearly, explaining promises Jelani had made to her, the quiet reassurances he had given, and the ways Saad had manipulated those moments for her own gain. Every word was precise, every accusation backed by the evidence she had gathered. She didn't shout or accuse wildly. She presented the facts in a way that anyone listening could follow, understand, and verify for themselves. The room reacted immediately. Family members shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, unable to ignore the truth now laid bare. Friends whispered to each other, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others covering their mouths to stifle gasps. Sada's confident composure, built over months of scheming, began to crack. Her smiles faltered, her eyes darted around, and the mask of control she had worn so carefully slipped with every word Kahina spoke. Kahina continued, calmly calling attention to small details that made her case undeniable. Overlapping stories, suspicious absences, and the inconsistencies in Sada's and Jelani's explanations. Each point she made tightened the net around them, and the more she spoke, the more the room's energy shifted. The polite hum of celebration was replaced by tension, curiosity, and a kind of uncomfortable anticipation. Everyone could feel the confrontation building to its peak, like a storm waiting to break. Even as the pressure mounted, Kahina remained composed. Her calm authority contrasted sharply with the panic rising in Saad and the guilt flickering across Jelani's face. She controlled the pace, letting the truth sink in slowly, giving everyone a chance to witness the betrayal unfold in real time. She didn't need to shout or dramatize. The clarity of her evidence and the precision of her delivery were enough to expose the truth completely. By the time she finished, the room was silent but electric, charged with the weight of revelations. Saad slumped slightly in her seat, her plan unraveling in front of every guest she had hoped would admire her. Friends and family glanced at one another, whispers of confirmation passing between them. Kahina had transformed the reception into a stage for truth, ensuring that every witness left with the full picture, and no one could deny the betrayal any longer. The room was still buzzing from Kahina's revelations, the tension thick enough to touch. Jelani shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact at first, but he couldn't hide forever. Under the weight of Kahina's calm authority and the undeniable evidence she had presented, he finally spoke. His voice was low, hesitant, and shaky at first, but it carried across the silent room. He admitted his involvement with Saad, confessing that he had broken Kahina's trust and acknowledging the betrayal for everyone to hear. "I was wrong," he said quietly, his words weighed down with regret. "I never should have done this. I betrayed Kahina, and I'm sorry to everyone here, especially her." The confession was heavy, but Kahina didn't react with anger or tears. She remained composed, her posture steady, her gaze clear. There was no need for dramatics. The truth itself was more powerful than any outburst. Her calmness allowed the weight of Jelani's admission to settle fully on everyone present. The impact of her planning and strategy became visible in how the room absorbed the moment. Friends whispered quietly, some nodding, others shaking their heads in disbelief, while family members sat rigidly, processing what they had just witnessed. Saad tried to respond, stammering through excuses and half-hearted explanations, but it was useless. The evidence Kahina had presented, screenshots, messages, receipts, and witness accounts, left no room for denial. Every attempt Saad made to shift blame fell flat. Her confidence, once so assured, had vanished completely. She realized too late that Kahina's calm, methodical approach had cornered her with facts, not emotion, and there was no escape. In that moment, Kahina's intelligence and poise shone brightest. She didn't need revenge to prove her point. The clarity of truth did all the work. Her ability to stay composed under pressure, to let the facts speak, and to orchestrate the exposure with patience and precision highlighted her courage and strategic thinking. The emotional high point wasn't about anger or shouting. It was about the undeniable revelation that she had reclaimed control and made sure justice was visible to everyone. By the end of Jalani's confession, the room had shifted. The betrayal was out in the open, every lie unspun, and Kahina's dignity intact. Saad sat defeated, Jalani remorseful, and Kahina stood quietly, a figure of calm authority. She had turned heartbreak into clarity, betrayal into empowerment, proving that the truth, delivered with strategy and courage, could achieve more than any emotional outburst ever could. The crowd slowly began to thin, guests whispering to each other, replaying what they had just witnessed. Gossip floated through the air like invisible threads, but Kahina didn't chase it. She stayed calm, walking through the reception with quiet confidence, aware that the storm she had orchestrated had already settled exactly as she wanted. The betrayal had been exposed, and she had done it with dignity and clarity, not anger or drama. As she moved among friends and family, some approached her with hesitant apologies, admitting they hadn't realized the truth or had been misled by Sada's careful. Others offered quiet support, recognizing the courage it had taken to stay composed while revealing such personal and painful truths. Kahina accepted their words graciously, her mind already thinking about the lessons she had learned and the boundaries she would set going forward. Saad, on the other hand, faced the fallout in real time. Her smug confidence had evaporated, replaced by embarrassment and shame that couldn't be hidden. Jalani's reputation, too, took a hit. Friends and family now saw him not as a partner or a man of integrity, but as someone who had betrayed trust in the most personal way. Their reactions were subtle but unmistakable, and Kahina noted each one with a quiet sense of vindication. Not revenge, but clarity. Walking through the aftermath, Kahina felt a shift inside herself. The pain and betrayal she had endured were real, but they had been transformed into growth, resilience, and empowerment. She realized she had regained control, not just over the situation, but over how she responded to life's challenges. The calmness, strategic thinking, and patience she had maintained were not just tools for this confrontation. They were part of a larger strength she had discovered in herself. By the end of the evening, she felt lighter. She had reclaimed her power, reassessed her relationships, and strengthened her connections with those who truly mattered. Betrayal had tested her, but it hadn't broken her. Instead, it had sharpened her wisdom, boosted her confidence, and reminded her that composure and dignity could accomplish far more than anger or public outbursts ever could. As the guests left, still murmuring and processing the drama, Kahina remained grounded, aware that this chapter had closed, and that she had emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and fully in control of her own story. Weeks later, Kahina sat in her apartment in Accra, the city's hum drifting through her window. The house was quiet, filled with the kind of calm that comes after storms have passed. She thought back over everything that had happened, the betrayal, the planning, the confrontation, and the exposure. Each memory still carried weight, but now it felt different. It wasn't raw or painful in the same way. It was a reminder of how far she had come. She realized just how much she had grown. The experience had taught her the importance of trust, but also the importance of boundaries. She knew now that loyalty and honesty weren't just ideals to hope for. They were essentials she would never compromise again. She felt stronger, more independent, and more in control of her life than ever before. No one could take that away. She thought about her friendships, the people who had stood by her, and the ones who hadn't, and she smiled quietly, grateful for the clarity. Looking out over the city, Kahina felt a sense of agency she had never fully recognized before. The past weeks had tested her, but they had also given her perspective, courage, and wisdom. She knew how to value herself, how to protect her peace, and how to move forward without letting past betrayals define her. She thought about the future with anticipation rather than fear, ready to embrace whatever came next with clarity and confidence. Kahina leaned back, letting a small, satisfied smile spread across her face. She had turned heartbreak into strength, betrayal into a lesson, and chaos into clarity. In that quiet moment, she felt a deep sense of justice and empowerment, not because of revenge, but because she had acted with integrity, courage, and poise. Life was ahead of her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt fully ready to step into it on her own terms.